Hello, everyone. We are joined again by Nikki, our volunteer from the shelter, and Reeta, our vet, as well as me, Nora. Today, we want to talk about the realities of shelter life, and especially how do we choose who to help. With limited resources, tough decisions need to be done. So, who has to make those and by what standards? How do we decide who is worth saving?
Well, currently in our shelter, we have to consider few factors. To begin with, I don't agree with the phrase "who is worth saving." Everyone is worth saving, but we have thousands of animals at the streets. They shouldn't be there in the first place. They are all facing dangers. But still, since we have very limited funds, we have to sometimes make a choice: who is in immediate danger, who is facing a life-threatening situation, and who cannot survive on their own. For example, very young animals, very old animals, sick and injured animals, or maybe animals that do not have the experience of living at the streets in the past, so maybe abandoned from a home directly. In these situations, we feel we have to intervene, but we also have a different aspect to consider, which is the financial part. Because we don't have a steady income, we don't have steady funding, we struggle monthly to make it through. So we have to consider the space, the money, and the manpower on how to look after all these animals properly. So it's not a worse situation than being at the streets, where it's actually a place they can do better, thrive, and find homes.
I understand quite well the ethical side of what you are saying, and every being should have equal right to live. But I would just like to raise a point that it might be sensible to rank animals based on the severity of their condition and kind of evaluate how much it would cost to help the animal and what is the prognosis and the quality of life. And maybe kind of evaluate whether to help one individual who is suffering a lot and whose care is going to take up a lot of money and a lot of resources versus many animals who might not need as much care and might be able to find new homes quite soon, so they wouldn't take up as much resources. The rational thing might be to let the most difficult cases go and focus on the ones that don't require as much effort, resources, and time.
Well, that's interestingly what I would have thought myself if I wasn't so involved in the shelter, and especially in a shelter of our type that is not funded and it doesn't have a steady budget to consider and see. So there's no budget stretch needed for these animals, because basically what we have noticed is that those difficult cases, they raise the money they need for themselves. You don't have to take money away from another animal. You have to just post a case, ask for people to donate, and these are donations that would only go to them because people got touched and moved by their story and want to help those animals. So it doesn't mean the money given on a difficult case takes money away from other animals that need sterilization, simple blood tests, or anti-parasite treatment. So in that sense, we have noticed this, especially in our type of shelter. Maybe in a different type of shelter that has a certain budget, people need to consider that, but our experience is very different. So we have the opportunity to go after those difficult cases and try to save them, and of course try at the same time to provide all the basics to all the quite healthy animals that we have.
That is a interesting point of view, and maybe a view that not many has thought about, and I personally haven't thought about that before. So you would have like different fundings for these emergencies, and then animals that maybe don't require as much resources, but it's a good thing, I think. So you can also try to help and save those that really need the help and maybe would not survive without the help of the shelter. But I would also like to raise a question about the point to which we can try to save animals. And I think that it's sometimes quite difficult to know if an animal is beyond the reach of help. And I personally think that if an animal is suffering and most likely will be suffering even after we give them the care they need, the animal should be put to rest. And we always have to evaluate whether the care we give is causing pain to the animal and if it is justified to cause pain in order to save the life of the animal.
Yes, I understand that point of view as well, and it's quite difficult to draw a line, but in most cases that we have come across difficult cases. For example, I remember our dog Areti from last year was bitten by other dogs. Basically, her throat was destroyed by the bites and had to be reconstructed. She went through a lot of pain and a long recovery period, but now she's doing fine. She's like a healthy dog. And I know that maybe in another country, not Greece, or maybe in another clinic and not specifically the one that helped us, it was totally justified to put her to sleep because it was a very difficult situation she was in and very difficult to reconstruct the anatomy of the throat. But we decided to go forward, and it was a good decision in the end. I'm not saying it's so clear all the time, but when you have like qualified vets, people that are capable of helping an animal, and same as with people in my head, like if you are willing to do crazy operations to save a person's leg, for example, after a car accident, why not try to do the same for the animal? And yes, the human will go through a lot of suffering, and yes, it's easier to have their opinion on what they want to do next, but for the animal also, maybe they have a big higher threshold of pain. You have to pay maybe attention more specifically to some signs like appetite, or if they are willing to play and interact even while going through some level of pain. But yes, I think maybe the mentality here is Greece. We are trying more difficult cases because we come more often across these very difficult cases because of the crazy situation at the streets. I mean, when people in Northern Europe, for example, they take very good care of their dogs, it's more unlikely they will come across crazy accidents or crazy situation. They do happen, but in lower numbers. Here, so many cases, I think the vets maybe are a bit more trained in a war zone situation. So things that are considered very difficult and painful, they can actually be managed and the animals to have a good life after, probably. It's not I think it's a little bit of a gray area. It's not black or white. But also to add that, yes, sometimes care can go too far. A recent example we have is our cat Kari that we try to help, even with the best vets in all of Greece at the university hospital. I personally think that the last 2-3 days of his life were just suffering, and maybe he should have been put to sleep a little bit earlier. He was a very interesting case. They couldn't determine exactly what was wrong with him, so they were trying one test after the other, but he was not doing good in the meantime, and he actually passed away on his own, which I think we could have saved him a little bit of misery. But that's as volunteers, we try to take this experience. It hurts a lot. We connect and we engage so much with the animal that we try to save because we put so much effort mentally and physically and trying to fundraise. And the vets, from their point, they're also doing their best for their science and trying to help the animal. And we are unfortunately gaining experience through the good cases and the bad cases. And For example, after Kari's case, I was able to decide more easily about another cat of ours, Toby, that could not be saved after a point that nothing could be done for him, and we decided to let him rest. And it was an easier decision to make because I could see, and the vets determined that, okay, there's no hope, this is not returning, he can have few more days, but it will be basically barely eating, surviving on an IV, dehydration, starvation. And then you can make the decision with all the experience you have gained. But there are mistakes, of course. Volunteers make mistakes, vets make mistakes, society, government. But we need to take all those things and gain experience and try better next time.
Thank you, Nikki. How did we even end up in a situation where we have to make that choice? And what about the toll it takes on the volunteers, the people who give their lives and money to solve a problem they did not create, and they are the ones end up carrying the responsibility and making these decisions?
I would like to point also that all these decisions that fall on the hands of the volunteers or on the hands of our shelter or other shelters like the one we have, the problem starts from all the abandoned animals. It's very difficult. We are talking now about very specific cases when we have in front of us thousands of animals in need. So many different things to consider, and it would not be so difficult for us if people would be more responsible owners. So in the first place, just having to choose who to save is completely exhausting. It's completely draining our brains. We are trying our best, but we wish we were not put in this situation by our fellow citizens when they carelessly abandon their animals at the streets. This is what creates all this huge mess. Because if it wasn't like that, so many animals in need, we wouldn't have to make choices, we wouldn't have to prioritize, and then it would be the owner's choice for their own animal that they know really, really well as well. They know their past experiences and how it reacts, if it's a good choice to continue with the treatment or not. But right now, the animals are faced with so many emergencies, injuries, sicknesses, and we, just a handful of people, have to make the decisions if they can help them or not, because also there is no free care here in Greece. Everything needs to be paid. So it's up to the volunteer to see if they can manage to care for the animal before and after maybe an operation, and also find the money to cover every case.
Thank you, Nikki and Reetta, for giving us a little bit of insight into the issue. And thank you to all of our followers and supporters for helping with the animals. We really appreciate that. And with the situation being as it is, it's the only way we can continue. We would love to hear if you have any ideas on how to change it, or any other questions or comments regarding this topic or any other topic.